Seeing that the two had already added WeChat, Paul on the side also took out his mobile phone and politely said to Charlie, "Mr. Charlie, why don't we add WeChat to each other and leave a contact information?" Charlie actually doesn't like adding strangers to WeChat, but since Paul took the initiative to say it, but he is not easy to refuse, so he turned on his mobile phone and scanned it and said, "Okay, let me scan yours." After the two added WeChat, Paul asked Charlie curiously, "Mr. Charlie, I want to know, what do you do?" Charlie smiled slightly and said, "I'm not as high as I am. I just stay at home. My usual job is cleaning, washing clothes, buying vegetables, and cooking." After listening to Paul, he was taken aback, but he didn't show any eyes or expressions that looked down upon Charlie. He smiled and said, "Mr. Charlie, this life is also very leisurely and elegant. To be honest, I am envious." After all, Paul was born in a family of high-ranking intellectuals, so the overall quality is quite high, not like others. When he heard that Charlie is the son-in-law, he looked at him differently. And Charlie didn't feel any embarrassment. After all, it was not a day or two for him to have the bad feelings about being the live-in son-in-law. At this time, Paul said to Charlie again, "By the way, Mr. Charlie, since you know Mr. Isik from Shangri-La, but I don't know if it is convenient for you to take some time to recommend me. After all, I just moved the company back to Orus Hill. We also need to actively expand Orus Hill's local resources and contacts. If Mr. Charlie can help me with this, then I will definitely not treat you badly." Charlie did not want Paul to know how close he was to Isik. After all, he almost guessed the relationship between himself and the Wade family just now. If he really got to know Isik through himself, he might have learned from it. Taste more details. So he apologized and said to Paul, "Mr. Paul, to tell you, I don't know Mr. Isik. I just have a personal relationship with a friend of him, and I am ashamed of this. That person is I met when I helped others watch Feng Shui." "Feng Shui?" Paul asked in surprise. "Mr. Charlie, are you a Feng Shui master?" Charlie smiled lightly and said calmly, "I can't talk about what Feng Shui master is. It's nothing more than reading a few books and learning with the old master for a while. To put it bluntly, it's somewhat foolish." Jacob on the side was afraid that Charlie would be embarrassed, and asked roundly, "By the way, Paul, what business does your company do?" "They have moved from the United States to Orus Hill specifically, so the business should be very large, right?" Paul smiled and said, "Uncle Wilson, our company is actually a multinational law firm, mainly providing high-end legal support for some Fortune 500 companies." Jacob asked in surprise, "Paul, are you a lawyer yourself?" Paul nodded and said, "Yes, Uncle Wilson, my dad and I both lawyers. To be clear, I have inherited his mantle." Jacob said with emotion, "The requirements for being a lawyer in the United States seem to be very high, right? Generally speaking, it seems that you need a PhD?" Paul smiled slightly and said, "Uncle Wilson, you are right. There are two professions in the United States that have the highest requirements for academic qualifications. One is a doctor and the other is a lawyer. Generally speaking, a registered lawyer must be at least a law school graduated with a master's degree." Jacob nodded slightly and asked, "Then what degree you have?" Paul humbly said, "I am PhD from Yale Law School." Jacob nodded in amazement and said, "Yale University, that is a world-class university. It is really amazing to be admitted to a doctorate in this kind of university." Paul said seriously, "Uncle tells you that even if you get a doctoral degree, you only have the qualifications to be a regular lawyer. A truly good lawyer needs a long period of growth, some even 10 years. More than a year of working experience and practical experience and hundreds of successful cases are not enough. So for me, I am just an entry-level elementary school student." Speaking of this, Paul looked at his mother, Mei Ching, and said, "Actually, I have just graduated. If I were to run our own law firm independently, my own experience would not be enough, so I'm just on the surface. I assumed the position of general manager, but it was my mother who really helped me behind the scenes, and even guided me to run the company. Without her help, the company would probably be destroyed in my hands."